Welcome to the deep dive. And, if you are joining us today, you are probably feeling the exact same whiplash that everyone else is feeling right now.
Oh, absolutely. It is constant.
Right. I mean, every single morning you wake up to just another fragmented piece of tech news. There's a new model release or some crazy new startup valuation or another massive tech company announcing a $1 billion data center.
Yeah, it's completely exhausting to keep up with.
It really is. So our mission today for you listening is to basically cut right through that daily noise. We are going to offer a comprehensive, unified framework for understanding what is, honestly, arguably the biggest technological shift of our lifetimes.
And to really anchor this entire conversation, we're looking at a sweeping 2026 essay by Dr. Don Kilburg.
Right, the former diplomat.
Exactly. He's an experimental psychologist, a former U.S. diplomat, and heavily involved in AI innovation. And his paper is titled A Unified Theory of the Cognitive Industrial Revolution.
And I love the premise he starts with because it points out this massive blind spot that we all have. Everyone on Wall Street, everyone in Silicon Valley, they're just obsessing over the billions of dollars pouring into the machine side of things, right?
Yeah.
The servers, the chips, the energy grid.
The physical infrastructure, yeah.
Exactly. But almost no one is looking at the other half of the equation. Like, what is actually happening to our human cognitive infrastructure?
And that is really the core of his theory. I mean, we have spent years treating artificial intelligence and human intelligence as two completely separate domains.
Like they operate in vacuums.
Right. But Kilburg argues that they just aren't separate anymore. They have become a single, coupled, co-evolving system. You literally cannot understand what the machine is doing without analyzing how it's actively reshaping the human mind that's using it.
Yeah, okay, let's unpack this. Because, when we look back at history, it's really easy to see how the original steam engine changed the physical world. Right?
Ouch.
We built these massive factories, we laid down train tracks across continents, and we just entirely replaced human muscle power with machine power. And Reid Hoffman actually recently used this exact analogy. He called generative AI the steam engine of the mind.
It is a profound comparison, honestly, because, the first industrial revolution gave humanity these insane physical superpowers, and now this cognitive revolution is giving us mental superpowers.
Right, and here's the thing, that analogy actually sets up the central tension of this whole deep dive.
How so?
Well, a steam engine, no matter how powerful it was, it didn't physically rewire the biological brain of the factory worker pulling the levers.
Ah, right.
So what happens when the machine we are operating is inherently a cognitive one? Like, does the mind steam engine fundamentally reshape the very minds that use it?
The short answer to that is yes, completely.
Blah.
But to really understand the mechanics of how that happens, we first have to properly categorize what AI actually is, because we often mislabel it.
Okay, so how should we look at it?
Well, historically, human progress is often grouped into three major leaps. First, you have the agricultural revolution, which liberated humanity from the constant daily threat of starvation.
Right, moving from foraging to farming.
Exactly. Then the Industrial Revolution liberated us from the strict physical limits of our own muscles and, animal labor.
Okay.
And now the Cognitive Revolution is stepping in to liberate humanity from our cognitive limits. Or, and this depends heavily on how you look at the labor market, displacing us from cognitive work entirely.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if you're listening at home, you might be thinking, wait, haven't humans always offloaded our thinking into tools?
We absolutely have.
Right, like we've used cognitive tools for over 2 million years. Stone tools required mental planning. We invented the abacus to hold numbers.
Writing itself is a cognitive tool.
Exactly, and Socrates famously panicked back in ancient Greece about that. He complained in Plato's Phaedrus that the invention of writing would implant forgetfulness in people's souls because they'd rely on written marks instead of internal memory.
Yeah, the classic technological panic.
Right. So why isn't this current panic over AI just the modern version of Socrates complaining about papyrus?
That is a great question. And what's fascinating here is the fundamental difference in the nature of the tool itself. I mean, Socrates was worried about memory atrophy, sure.
Yeah.
But every prior tool in the history of human civilization, whether it was a clay tablet, an abacus, the printing press, or even your smartphone, was an amplifier of human thought.
An amplifier, okay.
Yes, it took a thought that a human mind had already generated, and it stored it or transmitted it or calculated it faster. But AI is fundamentally different. AI is not an amplifier. AI is an author.
An author. meaning it actually originates the process.
Precisely. It doesn't just retrieve our thoughts, it generates its own. It reaches deep inside the cognitive process to automate perceiving, reasoning, communicating, and judging.
Oh, I see.
Like when you use a calculator, you still have to know the mathematical formula.
Right, I have to know what to punch in and why.
Exactly. But when you use AI, the machine does the reasoning, produces an output, and the human mind merely receives it. That reversal from human author to human recipient is exactly why we can't just brush this off as another fancy pencil.
Wow. Okay, so if we are dealing with a totally unprecedented system here, an author rather than an amplifier, how is this new reality actually constructed?
Well, Kilburg maps this out by dividing the world into two distinct poles. There is the machine pole and the human pole.
And we should definitely start with the machine pole because it reveals this level of deliberate engineering that is just, honestly, hard to wrap your head around.
It really is staggering.
It is. Kilburg dissects Jensen Huang's 2026 GTC architecture to show just how methodical this all is. The machine side is built with intense, calculating deliberateness and, frankly, over $1 trillion in capital.
And it's highly structured.
Highly. It is structured as a 5-layer stack. At the very bottom, you have energy. The electricity feeds the next layer, which are the chips, these massive GPUs.
Right.
And then the chips feed the infrastructure, which are the physical data centers. The infrastructure runs the mathematical models. And finally, the models power the applications that you actually see on your screen.
It is essentially thermodynamics and industrial economics applied directly to the concept of cognition.
Jensen Huang literally calls these data centers token factories. And the ultimate metric driving this entire machine stack is performance per watt.
Yeah, they measure exactly how much intelligence they can get out of the power grid.
Exactly. They're meticulously measuring exactly how many units of intelligence or tokens they can manufacture from a single gigawatt of electricity. It's measurable, it's scalable, and it is engineered to absolute perfection.
But, and here is where the theory gets really urgent, the friction emerges when we connect this hyper-engineered machine to the other half of the system.
The human pole.
Right. Kilburg contrasts that perfectly ordered, trillion-dollar data center with our haphazardly adapting, deeply vulnerable human biology.
It's quite the contrast.
It is. He breaks human cognitive infrastructure down into 7 different layers. So starting all the way down at the basic physics and biology of our brains, moving up through individual and social psychology into our institutions, and eventually topping out at philosophy and how we actually derive meaning in life.
And the terrifying part is that the machine pole is actively colliding with every single one of those human layers simultaneously.
Yes, all at once.
Let's look at the biological layer for a second, for instance. Kilburg highlights this 2025 preprint study out of the MIT Media Lab that measured exactly what happens to the human brain when we rely on this technology.
This study is wild.
It really is. They found that participants who used AI assistants to write essays showed up to a 55% lower neural connectivity compared to people who wrote their essays completely unaided.
55%. And it makes sense because the brain is the ultimate efficiency engine. It operates exactly like a physical muscle.
If you don't use it.
If you stop lifting weights, your muscles atrophy. If your brain doesn't have to struggle to pull a sentence together, to hold competing ideas in working memory, to navigate the friction of original thought, well, it simply stops maintaining those neural pathways.
Wow.
The researchers actually term this the accumulation of cognitive debt.
Cognitive debt. That makes perfect sense, but it gets even more alarming when we move up a layer to evolutionary biology.
Oh, definitely.
Kilburg brings in evolutionary psychologists to explain that our brains were highly optimized for a very specific environment, right? Pleistocene foraging.
Hunter-gatherer times.
Exactly. We evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to live in these small bands of people where information moved incredibly slowly and survival required navigating variable, unpredictable rewards just to find scarce food.
So let me ask you, are social media feeds and AI recommendation algorithms exploiting a malfunction in our brains, or are they exploiting our actual evolutionary design?
That is the tragedy of it. They are exploiting our exact evolutionary design.
Wait, so there's no malfunction?
There is no malfunction. Our dopaminergic reward system evolved to intensely motivate us to forage in environments where resources were super scarce. So when your brain reacts to the unpredictable intermittent validation of, say, pulling down to refresh a social media feed,
Which we all do constantly.
right, it is firing the exact same neurochemical reward circuitry it evolved to use when a prehistoric human found a rare, calorie-dense piece of fruit in the wild.
Oh, wow. So the brain isn't broken. It is functioning exactly as natural selection built it to function. The problem is that these ancient biological systems are now fully exposed in an informational environment they were absolutely never designed to survive.
Okay, so we have this deliberately engineered trillion-dollar machine pole moving at the speed of light, crashing head-on into a fragile, slow-evolving human pole that basically still thinks it's foraging for berries.
That's a great way to put it.
How do these two poles actually connect, practically speaking?
Well, that collision point is what Kilburg calls the interface. And he outlines 4 different modes of coupling at this interface.
Okay.
The first 2 are explicit, meaning we are totally aware we are doing them. There's perception. So when we consciously read AI-generated text or look at an AI image, and there is action or prompting when we actively type a query into a chat bot and sit there and wait for the response.
But if I'm tracking the logic here, the real danger isn't when we intentionally sit down at a keyboard to ask a chatbot a question, right?
No, not at all.
The real shift happens in the implicit modes, where the tech is just running in the background, like when AI silently filters a stack of job resumes or dynamically changes the prices we see for airline tickets, or, this is a big one, curates the exact sequence of news stories we wake up to.
Yes.
We aren't actively choosing to interact with an AI in those moments.
Yeah.
We are simply trying to live our lives, but we find ourselves operating inside an environment that an AI has entirely shaped.
Exactly. And that is the third mode, which he calls embedding. The machine silently wraps itself around our daily environments without ever asking for conscious consent.
It's just there.
Right. And that leads directly to the fourth, most profound mode, which is internalization. Over time, as we live inside these embedded environments, we don't just interact with the AI anymore. We actually begin to adopt its native framings.
Like we start thinking in prompts.
Yes.
We start expecting human beings in physical reality to have the same frictionless responsiveness as a language model.
Exactly. And this introduces a concept that completely reframes how we think about human agency. It's called System Zero.
Okay, System Zero, like Daniel Kahneman stuff.
Right. Most people are familiar with Kahneman's work on human decision-making. System 1 is our fast, intuitive, automatic brain, and System 2 is our slow, deliberate, analytical brain.
But System Zero operates completely outside of that.
It does.
Let me try out an analogy here for you listening to see if I have this right. Imagine walking into a massive grocery store to buy food for the week. You are going to use your deliberate System 2 reasoning to carefully choose between, say, a healthy salad and a sugary box of cereal.
Sounds like a standard trip to the store.
Right. But what you don't realize is that before you ever walk through the doors, someone else already went through the store and completely rearranged the shelves, removed half the produce, and placed specific sugary snacks right at eye level.
Oh, wow.
You still feel like you were making a free choice using your own logic, but the entire menu of reality was curated before your brain ever engaged. Is that what AI is doing to our informational reality?
That is a perfect way to visualize it. AI acts as a cognitive precursor. Before your intuition fires, before your deliberate reasoning ever kicks in, the machine has already framed the reality you are analyzing.
That is deeply unsettling.
It is. It is reshaping our minds not by attacking us from the outside, but from within the very conditions of thought itself.
And because the system is coupled, it creates these massive, inescapable feedback loops, doesn't it?
Yes, and Kilburg points out 2 major ones. The first is the training data loop. Studies are already showing that when humans use AI to write or brainstorm, it temporarily boosts the performance of lower-skilled individuals, sure.
Which seems good at first glance.
Right. But it severely reduces the collective diversity of culture as a whole.
Oh, you see this in daily life right now. Every corporate email sounds exactly the same. Instagram aesthetics, digital art, it's all bleeding into one homogenized, predictable style.
Because the mechanism behind that is circular. AI trains on human data. Humans then use that AI to create new content much faster. Then, the next generation of AI trains on that new AI-influenced human content.
A snake eating its own tail.
Exactly. It takes human thought, averages it out, removes all the weird creative edges, and feeds that homogenized version back to us as the new standard of reality.
And the second loop is substitution and atrophy. Researchers have spent decades proving that true, high-level human expertise requires deliberate practice, which means intentionally struggling right at the boundary of your competence.
You need the friction.
You have to push through the frustration of not knowing the answer to build the skill. But if an AI simply does the task for you instantly, that necessary struggle completely disappears.
And when the machine substitutes for human effort, human capacity collapses. The psychological term for this is metacognitive laziness.
Metacognitive laziness.
Yeah, we are willingly disengaging from deep reflective thought because the machine is more than happy to do the reasoning on our behalf.
It's basically the GPS effect applied to our entire intellect.
Oh, totally.
Like a decade ago, we all stopped remembering how to navigate the streets of our own cities because the Maps app on our phone did it flawlessly. We offloaded our spatial awareness. Now we are offloading our critical reasoning. We're literally forgetting how to navigate our own thoughts.
Which brings up a terrifying structural threat, the timescale mismatch.
Right.
It is the core vulnerability of the entire system. The machine pool, the chips, the algorithms, the data centers is evolving on an engineering timescale. It iterates and doubles in power every few months.
But the human bull.
Our biological brains, our cultural norms, our legal institutions, they evolve on a timescale of generations.
So if we are unknowingly atrophying our cognitive skills at scale, and the machine is evolving infinitely faster than our biology can adapt to it, who is stepping in to steer this train?
That is the million-dollar question.
Looking impartially at the sources Kilburg provides, governance right now is essentially a vacuum.
It really is.
Corporate governance is legally bound to serve shareholders and maximize profit, not to protect human cognitive flourishing. And state governance is entirely piecemeal. The EU's AI Act focuses on categorizing the risks of existing systems. The U.S. relies heavily on non-binding executive guidance and fragmented sector rules. Meanwhile, China aligns its AI development tightly with state objectives.
Right, there's no unified approach.
None of these models are structurally equipped to handle a borderless, invisible infrastructure that actively alters human thought.
Because none of them are designed to govern the very top layer of the human stack, which is philosophy and theology.
The meaning layer.
Exactly. We are rapidly approaching a profound crisis of meaning. Philosophers, like Hannah Arendt, for example, have long made the distinction between labor, which is the biological necessity of staying alive, work, which is the creation of durable, lasting things, and action, which is our engagement with one another in the political and social world.
And AI is touching all of that.
AI is currently colonizing all three of those spaces simultaneously. Economists warned about this nearly a century ago. John Maynard Keynes said that if humanity ever solved the purely economic problem of survival and outsourced our labor, we would be faced with the permanent, terrifying problem of what to do with our endless freedom.
And history actually gives us a precedent for a civilizational identity crisis on this scale, doesn't it? It's often referred to as the Axial Age, roughly between 800 and 200 BCE.
Yes. Philosopher Karl Jaspers wrote extensively about this. The Axial Age was a period when the emergence of large, complex, urbanized societies completely shattered the old tribal and kinship frameworks that humans had always used to understand who they were.
The old reality just broke.
The old social reality was destroyed by technological and organizational shifts. And because of that immense disorientation, entirely new meaning frameworks had to emerge simultaneously across the globe.
Like Buddhism and Greek philosophy.
Exactly. They were parallel responses to a world that no longer made sense.
And Kilburg is arguing that we have entered a modern axial age. Without new frameworks of meaning, we risk creating what Yuval Noah Harari calls a useless class, a massive population of people who are economically superfluous and existentially completely adrift.
It's a sobering thought.
Which brings me to what I think is the most glaring contrast of this entire theory. Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening. Jensen Huang has a clear mathematical metric for the machine side, tokens per watt. He knows exactly what success looks like. What on earth is our metric for the human side? Deep thoughts per hour, meaningful connections per gigabyte.
There isn't one.
None.
And that is exactly Kilburg's warning. There is no metric. There is no Federal Reserve for human attention. We have no institutional home dedicated to measuring, let alone enforcing, human cognitive flourishing. And without a metric, Kilburg maps out several trajectories for where this coupled system could go.
Let's walk through those trajectories because people need to know where this might head.
Well, the darkest path is the dependency spiral. This is where the invisible atrophy we discussed earlier just takes over. The population gradually loses the capacity for independent, critical thought, rendering us politically and culturally defenseless.
Right.
Another dark path is fragmentation. This is where AI acts as an aggressive capital multiplier, concentrating wealth and cognitive power so intensely that it creates extreme, unprecedented inequality and just fractures society entirely.
But the paper does outline optimistic paths as well, right? We aren't
I'm
just
sure.
doomed.
No, we aren't doomed. There is a path toward augmentation equilibrium. In this scenario, society adapts. AI handles specific, mundane cognitive tasks, and humans use the freed up mental energy to develop entirely new capacities.
Kind of like the printing press.
Exactly like how the printing press initially disrupted society but eventually massively expanded human intellectual life. And the ultimate optimistic path is transcendence.
Transcendence.
This is the idea that a healthily coupled human-AI system will produce new sciences, new arts, and entirely new forms of collective intelligence that we literally cannot imagine right now, simply because we are still thinking with our unaugmented brains.
Now, I do want to note, because it is vital for your perspective as a listener, that Kilburg includes a very sharp self-critique in his own paper. He explicitly admits that this entire unified theory is heavily Western-centric.
Yes, that is a huge point.
It relies almost entirely on Western economic and philosophical thinkers to define what work and value even mean.
It is a critical blind spot that he acknowledges. If we are going to build a truly unified global theory of human cognition, we have to look outside the West. For
Okay.
instance, historical analysis shows that cultures in Asia achieved major technological leaps like advanced printing and metallurgy centuries before Europe. But they absorbed those technologies without producing the same kind of destructive industrial economic upheaval.
They integrated it differently.
Exactly. Understanding the cultural conditions that allowed for that peaceful integration is essential. Furthermore, Kilburg points to the urgent need to incorporate indigenous knowledge systems.
Like the work of Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Yes. If we want to define human flourishing, we cannot rely solely on a modern, industrial, hyper-individualized worldview. We need the wisdom of systems that prioritize ecological balance and long-term generational thinking.
Because the machine stack is being built with over $1 trillion of incredible calculated care. But the human stack is going to require just as much intentionality, drawing from absolutely every wisdom tradition humanity has ever produced.
We simply cannot afford to adapt haphazardly while the machine evolves deliberately.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What this deep dive reveals is that the cognitive industrial revolution is not just a bunch of glowing servers humming away in a data center somewhere in the desert.
It's not just out there.
Right, it is not just a software update happening around us. It is a fundamental shift happening inside us. We are half of a beautifully complex, deeply vulnerable, coupled system, but currently, only the machine half has an architect.
We have to become the architects of the human half.
Exactly. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own today. If we recognize the urgent need for architects of the human cognitive stack, and if we actually manage to build new institutions to measure and enforce human flourishing, who gets to decide what the ideal human mind looks like? In our desperate attempt to prevent algorithms from homogenizing our culture, do we risk creating massive human institutions that standardize human thought anyway? Are we really prepared for the terrifying moral weight of engineering our own minds? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.